All right. I think we're all, unfortunately, very familiar with a report like this. Generally speaking, on a monthly business reviews, all the teams gather together, either with the GM within the hotel team and or with the ownership group. It's a simple table that breaks down what our revenue was for the previous month or the year to date, or some trend on where we're getting our business from by each channel. This this report, this one little slide that gets thrown up there causes so much agony in all of our lives that we literally have people screaming and yelling in the room about the commissions that we've just been talking about. We've smashed our RGI on Star Report. We've smashed our budget, but what the heck just happened here? It's a disastrous result. What's everyone doing around here? Are we doing more PPC? What are we doing? Are we doing meta search, programmatic display? I've been to a conference and someone was talking about QR codes and how that improves direct bookings. Blockchain, AI. All of these conversations happen, and everyone within the team start to panic. And we all go into different silos, and just like what the panel has been discussing here today, we each come up with our own strategies and agendas and tactics, and we all put it in place, spend a lot of money, spend an enormous amount of time working overtime, literally pulling our hair and whatnot, and generally get very little measurable result. And that is why we literally created a conference called the Direct Booking Summit, right? This thing causes so much agony in all of our lives, we literally came up with a conference. So I wanted to today basically share some of my experience and our experience and basically provide a bit of practical guide and some tips in unlocking value out of every channel to maximize revenue, which we'll talk about in turn will actually help you drive more direct bookings. So let's first of all address the elephant in the room. And I did not stage this talk to be right after the panel discussion here before, so I had no idea what was going on. But the challenge is that every team work in silos. And that's really, in my view, the biggest challenge in addressing this issue. You have marketing, coming up with their, PPC, email campaigns, and digital marketing, or what have you, and then you've got the e-commerce and PR and social doing their conversion rate optimization, merchandising. You got the press releases and everything else. But then you have the revenue, who, for that specific arrival date, you've got the minimum length of stay, and they've got closed out the offers and literally trolling the entire campaign, right? And this really is because we have people working in silos. Not everyone is talking to each other. No one is really understanding the overall scope of what we're trying to achieve. And so this real simple solution, the first step, is to actually bring everyone together and understand that there is a simple framework that we can all work with, which is really just for every business needs that we have. We need to clearly define what our target audience is. And for that target audience, which is the best channel to go after, using which message, promoting what product and what price. The product and the messaging and the pricing has so much impact to everything we do at the upper funnel campaigns that it is super important that everyone is incredibly aligned to this framework. And by the way, this framework actually will happen at every stage of the guest journey, right? So the dreaming, the researching, booking, and in-stay stages, you're obviously also going to go after your entire campaign will differ, whether you're going after someone who's never stayed at your property before or versus someone who always stays with you. The way that you're communicating and pricing to that particular customer will be so much different than someone who's never stayed with you before. Likewise, if you are just trying to raise your brand awareness to someone who doesn't even know you, you're going to have a different strategy, not only from the campaigns and the messaging that you're putting out there on each channel, but also the pricing and the availability of that pricing, versus who already knows about who you are. So we call it the local demand, where these people already have found you via an OTA or somewhere else, and they're just looking to book your hotel. The question just remains, is that person going to book via an OTA or your website or some other channel? And the way that you're going after that audience will have to be very different. So really, it comes down to, first of all, let's all understand our audience on each channel. Again, this is a practical guide. I presume 10 years from now, we're going to have machines doing all this work for us, AI, and again, all kinds of things. So there is a little bit of generalization, but I feel like this you can implement today without a lot of pain point and get an immediate result to your revenue. So this channel mix report, again, not my favorite report of all time. And one of the reasons is it aggregates the information in such a way that it is completely not actionable. And so the first thing that I suggest we do is just break this down into more granular level. So the channel share by booking window, for example. If you do this exercise, you are going to find nuggets of information and insight that you've never found before. By the way, all the stats that I'm sharing on these slides, and I've obviously taken out the numbers and whatnot, but these are actual real examples of hotels that we own and operate today in Europe. So I wanted to basically show you that these are possible and the nuggets of insights are out there. So for instance, you can see here, and by the way, this particular slide applies to a lot of our hotels. The numbers will be different, but the general trend is the same. So it might be the same as well for your hotel. But you see here, on every booking window buckets, there are channels who tend to perform better than other channels. You see here, the direct does the best on same-day bookings. Website does a little bit better from 1 to 7 days. You have Expedia at the 60-day mark, and Booking.com way out there in 90-plus days. But probably 80% of those Booking.com reservations will probably cancel. I don't know if you know. I mean, some of you are very familiar with those issues that we're facing as an industry as well. Next, you can also look at your channel share by room type. So this is quite important because on those channels mix report that we throw up there, we got the room night, ADR, and revenue. Well, the ADR is slightly higher or lower than on OTAs than your direct channels or vice versa. I've had revenue managers that come to me and say, I really want to work with so-and-so OTA because they are our highest, they give us the highest ADR. But when you just drill it down to where those OTAs are contributing to each of the room types that you have, because these are what is going to really be driving your net ADR and your booking window, you can see why. So here, for some reason, Expedia has got a really large share of the family rooms at this property. And you can see, generally speaking, the website and the direct channels tend to get a much higher share of bookings for upgraded room types. And these informations are important so that you know what your customers on which channels are booking what and when and how they're behaving. But it doesn't just stop with their transactional behavior. It's also important to look at what the guests are actually saying about your hotel on each channel. These are the number of mentions that one of our hotels was getting on each of the channels. And you can see, and I did not make this up, you can very clearly see for Booking.com customers, they're very comfort and food was very important. For Expedia, hotels and location were very important. And for direct channels, it was more about rooms and vibe. And understanding how and what your guests are saying on each channel will dictate how you're marketing to them, what messages you're putting out to them, what's actually important. In this case, it didn't really make a lot of difference on price, but you might find that one channel is more sensitive to pricing, and people are actively talking about that value than others. So once you have gone through and analyzed sort of the behavior of each of your audience on each of your channels, it's time to actually align your revenue strategies to those specific behaviors. So when you're doing this, your goal is to essentially get the best value out of each one of your channels as they currently exist today, right? So this is the reactive tactic. Without doing nothing, I'm not trying to influence anything. I'm just trying to make sure that I gain the most out of each behavior that I see. So you come up with a little channel summary table like this, so you know you have a precise understanding of how your each channels behave and what they're going to deliver and when. And then you can really price to sort of maximize your, start maximizing your direct channel revenues, shares. So for example, we saw how each channels deliver, or how much each channel deliver per booking window, which means that there is a certain level of demand at different points in days before arrival. So if you know this information, then you can sit and wait and price your hotel at such a point where you are literally saving that inventory for your direct bookers who are about to come in 0 to 7 day window. That we're actually not looking at how we paced last year in so much that we're freaking out when we're not picking up or pacing to how we were doing last year. Sometimes that can just detriment you. I mean, if you've always been relying on OTA, and you're trying to pace your booking to that data point, then you're always going to have the same result unless you do something drastically different. So understanding the pace point and actually having the guts to wait and actually price to gain your maximum share of direct bookings is important. The second thing that is that slide that I showed you about how each channel each channel's share on room type. And if you noticed on there, the direct bookers tend to have a much higher share of bookings for the upgraded room types. But the upgraded room types, the way we manage them is not very optimal, right? So we basically set a price for the lowest room type, the bar flexible lowest room type for 2 adults, and then we throw on supplements and derived rates on top of that. So you're literally just moving one rate and then having the rest of the rates move with it. But it's very fixed pricing. If you start to independently manage your rate by room type, then you can start to manage the demand that exists at each point in the booking curve, and you can start to sell them at a much higher rate. And when you do start to sell them, you know that it is actually our direct bookers who have the higher propensity to book them. So you are not only selling rooms much further in advance, but you're also increasing your direct booking share. Because if you don't do that, let's be honest, we give them away for free, free upgrades, and we give them away, like half the price and whatnot anyway. So it'd be much better when your rate is a lot higher to start shifting them at a much lower supplement if necessary. But the point is to price them and try to sell them independently. Another example, if you start to see that over the next few days that you see a very soft period, you would know exactly which channel it is that you can actually go and rely on to reverse that trend, right? So in this example, in that particular period, maybe it was that the Expedia actually had the highest booking channel share, and so that you might actually try and do something there to try and get some better result out of that channel. But the key is we want to manage the demand to maximize direct channel share and then build demand where direct cannot deliver today so that we can maximize revenue. Maximizing revenue, first and foremost, it's got to be your first step. You can't optimize for direct booking share if you don't have enough demand. So you want to get there, but you want to do it in such a way that you're actually still shifting a lot of that volume through direct. So at this point, our RGI is smashing, we're smashing budget, and we can better explain to in the monthly meetings that our booking share has increased. Then the final step is to really build a testing culture. Too often, I think we are so afraid of testing something new or different, or that we have such a belief that we just don't want to have to go against it, that we end up not trialing anything, or that we just say, I don't believe in it, so we just won't do it. But I think this is actually a very important thing, because this is where we need to go offensive, right? So if pricing and aligning your revenue strategies to your existing current user behavior of each channel is more of a reactive and just trying to optimizing that piece, then once you understand the areas where your direct channels are weak, this is where you can start to test to try and actually understand, okay, that our website isn't doing as well at capturing the single beds, 50 days from now. What can we do to actually drive that? Where are our audiences, and which acquisition channels are we using to actually improve on that? And so if you guys aren't doing this already, there should be someone in your hotel or in your organization who needs to be more of a revenue strategist, right? One who can take charge of every business needs and identify the target audience, and then actually work with and bring the entire teams together, and then start working with a cohesive plan to start generating and getting to a more positive result. And the way we do that is, just like what we've talked about today, is to analyze your current behavior of each of your channels, understanding your audience. You start to ideate, what can we do to actually improve some of these things? Then you write it all down and you start to prioritize, okay, which one do we think is going to give us the best result? Which one is going to be the easiest thing to implement? And how confident are we that this is actually going to deliver the result that we think it is? And then you start experimenting. And you just start experimenting on a bunch of things. It could be anything. It could be the wildest things. It is about pricing. It's about what messaging we're putting out there. It could be a copy on a PPC. It could be that creative on your display ads. It might even be doing like a travel ad on Expedia. It might be doing commission overrides on Booking.com. I don't know, but do you know what impact that has on your business? Do you know what other knock-on effect that might have on your direct bookings? If you don't know the answers to that and you can quantify that, then you should test it. You have to have the data. And even something like a Triptease would be the perfect thing to experiment on. And Triptease did not sponsor this slide. But the idea is the same. You just want to get out there and start experimenting anything and everything, and just have the entire organizations to their buy-in that this is happening. And of course, probably the single most important thing is that you kind of want to have the entire team to focus on one key performance indicator, a North Star, if you will, that everyone is focused on. So that this is what unites all of your team members together in trying to achieve the same goal. And this could be any KPI. It'll be different for every hotel and every organization. The one that I like the most is this revenue per guest. This is particularly difficult thing to do because we have this thing called P&L. And this P&L thing actually goes all the way up to, from the hotel operation to ownership, and to banks, and it just goes everywhere, and it's kind of difficult to mess with that thing, or it becomes very hard. And I've tried, and I just gave up. Even at the ownership level, it's just too difficult. But from an operational point of view, this is a brilliant metric to use, because this metric certainly focuses you on not selling rooms, but it's about selling to guests. And when you do that, you have to segment your guests, just like we segment our market segment into a bunch of other things. We'll do, new guests versus returning guests, the family versus single travelers, midweek versus weekend. You'll do all kinds of metrics to really hone in on who do we want in our hotel, and how do we get there, and what message are we putting out to them, and at what rate would they actually buy. Not only that, we will actually then focus in on retention. So once the guest has stayed with us, how do we get that person to stay with us again? That inverse pyramid framework that you saw earlier, it applies directly to the guest staying in-house and the returning guest. And if we're able to get more guests to come back and stay with us, and again, I don't have the data, you're going to have to find this out on your own, but chances are those guests are going to book direct. So it is going to improve on your cost of sale. You are improving on your direct bookings. And this metric will help align everyone to work towards the same metric. So in summary, it's really simple. Understand your audience, how they're booking, where they're booking it, what message that they respond to, and at what price they're buying. 2, align your revenue strategy so you maximize the potential of every single channel. So you're actually gaining the value out of each one. And then 3, continuously experiment to get more out of your direct bookings. But if you don't have a testing culture, then you'll essentially, it'll be difficult to get there. Thank you.